Welcome to the second half of tonight's stream where I talk about Crow in Rising Thunder. He's an advanced character, but he is super comfortable for kind of experienced fighting game players. I think he's really cool and he's got a lot of neat tools. And he's also a character that can be hard for new players to understand, both when you're playing as him and when you're playing against him. So I thought I'd put together a just kind of short-ish overview of his character on the stream, so that people who are interested can check it out. Whether you're learning how to play him or learning how to beat him, I think this stuff will be useful. And I'm not going to be emphasizing like specific builds or tech or so on. I just want to describe in broad strokes how the character works, in the hopes that that'll help anyone who wants to learn how to beat him or how to pick him up and really start playing him. Because what I found is that whether you're playing as him or you're playing against him, Crow can be one of the most frustrating characters in Rising Thunder at the moment. Players on the forums routinely talk both about how bad he is and about how good he is, and that's in part because when he's on the field, he either looks really, really good or really, really bad. That's just kind of the way he is. He has the strongest strengths and the weakest weaknesses. And it's kind of a tricky character archetype to deal with, so I thought I'd just walk through the stuff real quick. So, let's take this into training mode. So, to start out with, the build that I recommend starting with Crow is Kinetic Deflect. You don't have a choice for the special one yet, so you have to pick Devil's Halo. Dire Sting for his second special, Riposte for his third special, and then you don't have a choice on Overdrive. And basically, the reason I like this build is that it gives you a nice mix of offensive and defensive options. So Crow's weaknesses are all around his attempts to escape pressure. If you start attacking him, and if you get a knockdown, he's probably screwed. Because he doesn't have any great options. He doesn't have any invincible reversals, really. And he doesn't really have any normals that are great for kind of resetting the momentum. And so what you end up with is you're going to use Kinetic Deflect to get yourself out of tricky situations. And eventually you can get Crow to the point where you don't need to worry about it. But until you do, there's a pretty steep learning curve. And so I'd recommend taking Kinetic Deflect. For his second special, I recommend Dire Sting. Basically, the reason I recommend Dire Sting is that it combos off lights. None of the other two do. So what you get is you get an option which makes your crouch light threatening. Without that, there's pretty much no reason for anyone to ever respect your crouch light. And if no one respects your crouch light, then it's harder to set up throws. So I like Dire Sting. It has the most utility out of the options, but by no means does it define the core of this build or the core of the character. And then when it comes to Fog of War and Riposte, basically Fog of War is the move that gives you a cloaking field. Riposte is the one that gives you one hit of armor and a dash, right? So Riposte is the closest thing that Crow has to any kind of wake-up option, so we're going to go with that for now. Eventually, when you feel more confident in your aggression, you can take Fog of War and it'll work fine. I have been experimenting with Fog of War a lot lately, and I really like it, but I still recommend that new Crow players start with Riposte. So let's go ahead and bring this in training mode now. Loading, yeah. Cool. So, to start with, as I mentioned earlier, today's video is going to be focused mostly on Crow's game plan. Okay? So, let's look at his moves a little bit. He's got pretty average lights. His mediums are kind of stubby-ish in range. They're all right. And his H button is going to get a lot of work because all of his H's are pretty good. Okay, so we're going to start. You saw some of his moves there. That's a special one, which is his disc. He throws frisbees at one of 3 different trajectories. He can also charge it up, so it does multiple hits. Yeah, just fucked up the enemy Crow's knee right there. Special 2, this is Dire Sting. This is the one that combos off lights. It's going to be useful when we're up close. It also gives you a knockdown, which is great. And then his special 3 is Riposte. As you can see there, he flashes blue, so he gets 1 hit of armor. And if he takes a hit while he's armored, and you're pressing a direction, he'll dash in that direction, or if you're pressing up, he'll jump. This is his basically his escape. It's not guaranteed, stuff can beat it, but it's better than nothing. Okay, so we'll start at full screen range, And, well, the best way I can explain this is that Crow is a character that is, he's a pressure character, but he's kind of a zoning pressure character. And what I mean by that is he only does damage if he's in close. So he's not going to do a whole lot of damage if he's trying to keep you out. And his get off me tools are not great. His keep away tools are not fantastic. So a lot of what he does is he tries to start from a relatively safe distance and work his way in. And he does that mostly by intelligently using his discs. Okay, so like I mentioned, the discs come out in one of 3 trajectories. It's based off of which direction you're holding. So if I hold back and press disc, I get a super short one. Neutral disc goes like that, and then far disc covers the screen just about. If I'm at full screen, the far disc usually won't hit. And this is actually pretty important because when you compare his projectiles to other projectile characters like Chell or Vlad, both of them have full screen projectiles. Crow does not. So Crow already is going to have to do a little bit of work to get in. So at full range, what I'm doing here is I'm mostly chucking projectiles and just trying to walk a little bit closer, right? And if you'll notice, this disc is out here for quite some time. It takes up a lot of space. And it takes up a lot of space on both the X and Y axes, right? Which most fireballs don't really do. Most fireballs just work in a straight line. And this one obviously does not, which is kind of cool because what it means is that it shuts down a lot of mobility, right? If it's an enemy Vlad and he's flying around in the corner, you can hit him with a disc. If they're trying to make their way in closer, a disc will cover a lot of the space that they need to traverse. Not all of it, but it'll cover enough to be annoying, right? And that's your goal, right? So when you start, that's a super. If you didn't know what it looked like, that's fantastic. So your goal with Crow usually ends up starting out with trying to get a safe range or whatever, and then throwing discs and seeing what they do, right? So if they're fireball characters, they'll throw stuff back at you, and you'll have to beat out their fireball game. If they're not, and that's usually Chell and maybe a little bit of Vlad, pretty much everyone else is going to have to get in your face somehow. So you end up in a situation where both characters are trying to close the gap, right? They both want to get close to each other. The trick is, though, that being close alone is not enough to give you an advantage. What you need is you need to be close with a disc in the air so that they have to respect the disc, right? If I'm in close, but things are neutral, then I have to rely on my normals to create an advantage. And it's doable, but Crow's normals aren't that much better at this range than anyone else, right? If a disc is out, then I get to walk up and do stuff. And if they want to do anything, they have to deal with that disc. Either they block it, and then that lets me get in close, right? Or they don't, and they get hit, and that lets me get a combo. And even if I trade, if the disc hits, I'm probably still doing okay, right? So, you're going to start out by, if you're at roughly full screen, right? And this is I should explain, the reason why I would start out at roughly full screen is because, like I said before, if Crow gets knocked down, he has a hell of a time getting back up because he doesn't have any great wake-up options, and his normals don't really do much in the startup phase. So what ends up happening is you can start at the round start distance of around here and start fighting for momentum, but if you eat a dragon punch or a sweep or something because you haven't created an advantage for yourself by throwing a disc, then what happens is you get knocked down, you might have just given up the round there, right? So I like to start from a pretty far range, throw a disc, and just see how they react to it, right? If they back up and we stay at full screen range, then what happens is congratulations, you just push them a little bit more into the corner. Go ahead and throw another disc, right? And so on and so on. Eventually, they'll hit the corner and they can't back up anymore, and you can be throwing discs around here, walk forward, throw another disc, walk forward, throw another disc, walk forward, throw another disc. Slowly, you're gradually increasing, or you're gradually closing the gap, right? And your goal here really is to close the gap to about this range, where you can use a stand H. This is one of the most far-reaching normals in the game, and it's really cool because it pulls them back a lot, right? So I'm standing at about half screen. If I walk forward just a little bit, I'm going to hit him, right? And it does a nice chunk of damage too. Look at that. That's a decent chunk right there, right? You can hit people with this a lot, right? If it's blocked, it's safe. So basically, the main thing you need to worry about is that it gets stuffed, but most characters aren't pressing buttons from this range because they don't have a poke of comparable range. So that means that people are going to be jumping, right? Which is okay, because if people are jumping from here, you can still throw a disc relatively safely. This time a neutral disc, probably, because a far disc will go over them, right? But this covers a lot of the jump arc, right? So far, your plan has been bully with discs at full range until you can get to a place where you can safely close the gap. And then when you get to about neutral disc range, that's when you start playing with your stand H, right? And again, it's a real nice footsie tool, right? You can, boom, so you can, if the disc hits, you can go ahead and just throw this out. It's pretty safe. It's fun to play with. The other thing you can do from this range is you can do forward H, but be careful. Make sure you're doing this intentionally. A lot of times, if you're walking around, like kind of trying to like, you know, go back and forth and obscure ranges a little bit, you can end up pressing forward H, which is great. It hits low. It leads to a combo. You can do some fun stuff in the corner. But it's also super unsafe because you cover the entire screen. It takes a long time for the attack to come out, so you might eat shit on the way in. I recommend not doing it until you see them starting to move forward, or if they're blocking high a whole bunch from this range. But anyway, so your goal was start out here, bully your way in here. And what you want to do here, though, is this is great, but you're not going to get big damage here, right? Really, what you want to do is control the pace here with discs, liberal use of discs, and your stand H to just kind of stop them from getting cheeky, right? Your goal here is actually to close the gap further, because all of Crow's damage comes from in close, right? So here, you've got your stand H and your disc, but what you want to do is you want to run in behind the disc, right? Again, that way the disc is helping cover for you while you're vulnerable running, so that if they try and do anything, they'll eat a disc and then you get to convert, right? And you can do that pretty easily, right? So if I just throw a disc here, boom, oops. That's moderate damage. We can get it up there a bit. Look at that. So, ran in there under cover of a disc. The disc hit. I hit him with 2 mediums into Dire Sting, and then I got a little nice extra hit after the Dire Sting and a knockdown. That's pretty great, right? But so fundamentally, you can say, okay, at this range, right, at neutral disc range, my job is to close the gap with cover, right? I don't want to just run up here because then I'll eat shit, right? And I could try and poke my way in, but the problem is that Crow's walk speed is pretty slow, and the rest of his pokes aren't that great, right? Like, his standing medium doesn't really do that much. It's okay. It looks kind of cool. His back medium is like an anti-air that does no damage. It's better than nothing. But, like, fundamentally, all my damage opportunities come from in close. They come from knockdowns. So, that's what I want to do. Since Crow is a fragile character, and he doesn't have strong footsies, and really he gets boned if he gets knocked down, I can't just run in. What I have to do is throw the disc and then run in. Whether, you know, and I can run in and just go for, like, I can go for a throw. I can run in. I can go for a low attack. I can run in. I can even run in and go for a high attack, right? I can do this. I can go for a cross up. Whatever. All of my work starts with a disc that will cover my approach, right? And it's worth pointing out that most of the time, like, a lot of these pressure strings that you're going to see me doing here are not flawless. They usually have gaps, so if someone's mashing DP or super or whatever, I can get punished in some cases, right? Like, if I throw this disc and run in, depending on the timing, they can just Dragon Punch through the disc, hit me. They'll be invincible from the Dragon Punch, and so the disc doesn't even matter. But even if it trades, the disc doesn't knock down and Dragon Punch does, so I could still potentially be screwed in that trade, right? So the goal is you shouldn't feel safe attacking unless you have a disc out. So get those discs out, right? That's basically the main thing that a new Crow player can do to get better, is just do something into a disc and keep on doing that something into a disc or other somethings into a disc to stay safe, right? So here, my goal is to close the gap, right? And when I close the gap, that's when I can start using some of my combos. So run in here, boom. That's light into Dire Sting. That's a special 2 into sweep for a sweet juggle. It works because we're in the corner, right? And it's a knockdown. And this is kind of probably one of the more important things to learn with Crow, is that you're going to use the sweep a lot because it gives you a knockdown. But you can also cancel it into a disc, right? So there I canceled it into a charge disc, which is pretty cool. So I can get a meaty charge disc, or close to it. I can also just do a regular disc. And if they quick rise, they get hit by that. right? And so this is important because what that does is it lets me get back in the booty, right? So that's kind of the fundamental loop that you're looking with Crow, right? Is you want to get in there, you want to get up in that ass, but you don't want to do it without covering yourself with a disc. So that should feel safe to get in there. Boom. Right? Even if the disc doesn't hit, it still controls space because they can't press buttons without risking getting hit by it. Boom. But the important thing is, every time this dude wakes up, I want him to stand up into another disc. And every time I don't have disc pressure, whatever it is, that's when I back the hell out. I don't stay in there because that's when they can start beating me up. I back the hell out, right? And I try and get back to this range where I can start bullying and then work my way in. He's a really fascinating example of a hit and run character, which is not something you see a lot of in fighting games these days. Usually when people get in, they want to stay in. But Crow can only afford to stay in if he's got something helping him out. In this case, it's his disc. The closest similarities that I've seen in other fighting games would have to be characters almost like Faust or Milia, weirdly enough, in Guilty Gear, where they use some kind of projectile to cover their aggression, right? I guess even Soul and Kai do that a little bit. But absent that projectile, Crow has like very, very poor tools, right? Because he doesn't have anything that can get pressure off of him. So once again, just to reiterate, from here, I'm going to go in, and that's when I get to start playing stuff like with cross-ups, when I get to play high-lows. The important thing is that I always have a disc, right? And the easiest way to go practice this is actually not whilst the stuff is hitting the training dummy, because that's super easy. What you want to do is you want to set it to always block and just see how long you can attack and start figuring out where the holes are in your defense or in your offense where you don't have a disc out, right? So I can start like, boom, right? So bully him around a little bit, bully him around, boom. Okay, now we're in neutral range. Now I'm gonna run in. Okay, well I didn't, you know, obviously it's blocking, so I didn't get it all, but I can make him block a sweep, and then that disc right there, the close disc, is good for helping me walk forward, right? Because if he presses a button during this, when it's on its way down, it'll start hitting his move. So I can walk forward. I just gotta throw, sweep, knock down, make him stand up and do this. Ba, ba, ba. Alright, blocked, stand up into another disc. This time I'm gonna jump in, boom, another throw. Alright, this time I'm gonna cross up. Alright, well, he blocked it, it's okay, got another throw. Far. Get in here, boom. Alright, see, there, once I'm at peak sweep range, that means I gotta back out and throw another disc, because my other normals aren't really that useful here, right? I'm too close for stand H to be a good choice. Boom. So, if I am in here, even if they block the sweep, I still want to cancel into a disc and get that disc out as soon as possible, right? His sweep keeps him in block stun for a long time. If you look, they have to block 3 hits there. But I can cancel into a disc after the first one. So this is really great at keeping the pressure alive. And then from here, I can start even looking at like his air S2, which is slicer, moves me forward, right? Gives me a nice frame advantage, so I can walk in and keep things up, keep the attack up, right? That's cool. So you can also do jump medium into air slicer for 2 mid hitting or 2 high hitting attacks. Or actually, I guess I think air slicer hits mid. But this is actually not a combo if it's blocked, the first 2 hits, so they can dragon punch through it, which is pretty important. But yeah, you just get good at keeping a disc out on the screen at all times. And if you don't have a disc, and if you're not canceling into a disc, you're probably not safe, right? So that right there was super unsafe, because what I did was the disc didn't actually hit, and then I ran in and crouched light. Anyone in this game is going to blow me up for this, right? So you got to get really good at keeping those discs out and making sure they're always blocking them, right? And so for good Crow practice, basically you want to feel comfortable if they're blocking. At some point, you're going to want to open them up and get knocked down, and to do that, if they're blocking, everything you got requires throws, right? So get a liberal mix of throws in there. But fundamentally, this is how you want a Crow to feel. You want him to feel like, you want your opponent to feel like you've always got a disc out so they can't do anything, and you're always getting hit by something, you don't know what it is, right? And then right when they think they've got you figured out, that's when you hit them with a throw or something, knock them down, and then they have to worry about the stuff all over again, right? This is kind of what Crow should feel like. So that's kind of the basic Crow game plan right there. Next, I will talk a little bit about his weaknesses, which is, frankly, it's getting knocked down. Getting knocked down sucks. So let's go ahead and reset the stage. And this time, we will tell the dummy to just walk up and sweep us a whole bunch. So you gotta record. I control Red Crow. Boom. Alright. Oops. Haha, take that. So right off the bat, Crow has no real moves that get him out of this situation. Which means that once they get in on you, once they knock you down, you kind of have to keep on dealing with it until you find an escape, right? And it's not easy. He doesn't have any invincible wake-ups except for his super, which is a pretty risky bet. Though that's not to say all Crow players don't at some point in their career do a whole bunch of wake-up supers, because that's your best option sometimes. But if you think about it, his best options are usually to backdash, or if you picked riposte, it's to riposte, right? So, first off, let's look at the backdash. I'm gonna go ahead and reset this. Now, if you aren't used to it in Rising Thunder, that golden kind of aura or shield that arrives or that shows up around my character means that I'm invincible for the duration of that aura. I don't have a hitbox. So in other words, if a move hits me or overlaps with me while I'm backdashing, I will just go straight through it. Woo! So that's a median hit. Like that, right? So you can do that on Wake Up. And basically, what you have to keep in mind is the timing can be kind of tricky, because you want the inputs to happen within a reasonable window of when Crow is standing up and able to actually perform an action, right? The weird thing is that if you're not used to actually timing this stuff out, basically, Crow, if you see Crow get up there, he's not actually capable of performing anything until pretty late in the animation, right? Even if I quick rise, it takes some time. Oop, messed it up there. But if someone is pressuring you with discs, right? Especially if those discs are aimed at where you're going to stand up into, like this, right? If you backdash out of that, you should be able to get out clean. And if you're out clean, if you're back at this range, then it's anyone's game again, right? So that's one option. Your one option is to Wake Up backdash. It's not unbeatable, but it is pretty good. Crow's backdash in general is pretty good. What you have to worry about is if people see it coming, then they're just going to run up and sweep you, because the invincibility does not run that long, right? You could actually even you could even eat stuff that's way more damaging than a sweep if you're if they really read you hard, right? They can just run up and do whatever, because there's recovery at the end of that backdash. The second thing you can do is block. And this is fantastic, but the problem, and I think every Crow player will at some point need to get good at blocking. The problem is that if you're just blocking against Crow, he's good enough. If he's good enough at keeping discs out, you're not really going to have that many options to actually do something. He's not like a Dauntless or a Chell, where if you block their stuff for a while, then they are pushed out and you don't have to worry as much about it. Crow will stay in your face. That's the nature of what he does. Is he runs in there, knocks you down, gets a disc out, and even if you weren't blocking, or even if you were blocking his stuff, it still exits through the disc so that he can get back in there, right? So, blocking is great, and you'll have to get good at it. But in some matchups, it won't save you. So, your other option is riposte, right? Which is a special 3. Boom. Come on. Woo! Mistiming it. It's not the easiest to time, and it's on 8-second cooldown. Alright, great. Woo! There we go. We'll try and demo that again. Ow. So in that case, I actually got hit by the second hit of the sweep. So that gives me backdash. Yeah, if I'm not in training mode, this move has an 8-second cooldown, so you only really get to use it every few times. Though if you use it on Wake Up successfully, then you get some of the cooldown refunded. So there I'm actually teching up, but again I'm getting hit by the second hit of that sweep. It doesn't really do that much damage, but it's keeping me under pressure. We'll demo with a different move real quick just to make this easier. So, boom. There, that's me going up. And then you can actually also run forward. Oops. That didn't do it. There you go. Right. And so the idea is that as an enemy is starting to attack Crow and they're you know, they've knocked you down, they smell blood, you've been pissing them off with discs all day, they're going to want to get up in you, and a well-timed riposte can get you out of that, right? The best thing, the ideal riposte usually happens if you go up and then you're able to hit them, because you get access to an air action as though you had jumped, right? I'll show what it looks like real quick. In that case, I just got like a 35% combo off of a riposte, which is pretty cool. However, there's only one hit of armor on riposte, so lots of attacks will blow it up because you'll get hit out of the dash or the jump or whatever it is before you actually get a chance to escape, right? So those are basically your options. You can riposte, which is kind of the situational move. You can backdash, which is another situational move, or you can block, and then you're vulnerable. Only, I mean, that's your defensive results blocking basically depend or determine whether you're going to get beat up or not. So at some point, you're going to have to practice good blocking with Crow. So that's kind of it for the basic gameplay behind Crow. We're still adding new moves to his kit. I think he's eventually due for a new fireball, so we'll see how that goes. But basically, the idea is that after watching this video, you should have a functional idea of how to use him. And really, I said earlier, I will switch to the camera now. So what I said at the beginning of the segment was that this section is meant for people who have a hard time with Crow and people who have a hard time playing Crow, right? So if you're playing him or you're playing against him, either way he can be super frustrating. And a lot of new players will post on the forums or they'll talk on Twitter or Reddit about how such and such character is overpowered. And the fact is that when it comes down to kind of the relative power ratings in Rising Thunder, as of our technical pre-alpha, there isn't really a huge disparity in power between one character and another. The trick about Crow, and Vlad also runs into this as well, is that they're very unique characters. There aren't that many characters out there quite like them, and even the rest of the Rising Thunder cast doesn't really have much in common with them, which means that you need to learn that matchup specifically, no matter who you want to get good at, because fighting game fundamentals alone will not teach you how to beat a good Crow or a good Vlad, just because their stuff is so weird comparatively. So what I really want people to get out of this is, even if you don't want to play Crow as a main character or whatever, you should learn what his tools are so that you can learn to beat them, right? There are holes in his game. His goal in his game plan is usually to keep discs out there because that keeps him safe. But the thing is that the startup of the disc is vulnerable, so he tries to cover it by comboing off of a sweep or whatever. But that's not perfect, because if something trades with his disc and knocks him down, he still loses that trade, right? Because then he gets knocked down, and he has a harder time getting out of a knockdown situation than pretty much anyone else in this game, right? So hopefully, if you're new to Crow, you check that video out and you get an idea of how his game plan works, and that's pretty cool. But if you're trying to figure out how to beat Crow, pick him up and play him for a week and see where the seams are, because he does have them. At high levels, like, people have figured out how to beat Crow. That doesn't stop him from being really good, right? Because at high levels, currently in Rising Thunder, like, pretty much anyone is viable, which is kind of crazy and awesome. But it can be super frustrating learning how. And the best way to learn how is to see how everybody deals with it themselves, right? So pick Crow, mess around with him. You're going to get wrecked a lot, actually. In general, we find that, at least as far as I can tell as a character, is that Crow's success in this game is largely determined by whether you win in neutral or not, right? So he has okay neutral game tools, but he's playing a more higher stakes neutral game because he doesn't have any reversal options, right? So you can think of it as like, you start at mid-screen range, and if I knock you down as Crow, Then I get a lot of super awesome setups, and I get to start I get my momentum. I get to chuck discs at you for days. But if you knock me down at that range, then you can beat me much more easily than I can beat you, right? So Crow is very much a high risk, high reward character in the neutral, because if you win in the neutral, then you get to pay off big in terms of pressure. But if you lose in the neutral, then you're going to eat pressure. Probably like there have been matches where I lost just because I got knocked down once and was not able to deal with the incoming pressure. So if you're having a hard time playing against Crow, try that out and see what it feels like. See what decisions you make that end up in you getting your ass beat because you're playing Crow and you got knocked down and you're paying for the price, right? And then learn how to do that to other people. That's fundamentally what like a fighting game should feel like, right? And this is kind of neat. Like I started today's stream talking about Super Turbo, and then I kind of joined it with this Crow segment because that's kind of the reason that I love fighting games with finite scope, right? Or at least a more finite scope, something smaller like a Super Turbo or Rising Thunder rather than something big like CVS2. Don't get me wrong, I love CVS2. But you can do that, right? It's possible to just sit down and learn another character and start getting an idea of kind of what you were missing playing against them, right? That's something that I had a really hard time doing in Street Fighter 4 because Street Fighter 4, it's like learning a new character. There's a lot you have to learn in terms of setups and execution and moves and ranges and footsies and matchups and so on, right? Like if I want to learn a new character, I kind of have to learn, how that character plays against 40 others, and that's a lot of work, right? But at the stage in the game with the smaller games like Rising Thunder, it's easier to sit down and take a look at kind of what you're running into. And this is kind of how the old schoolers did it, right? Like when we got blown up by something and for me it was CVS or Marvel or whatever, the first thing or usually what it was we saw like a bootleg video of someone getting blown up by a thing, like, oh crap, Justin's playing he's playing anti-air Cammy, or whoa, Sentinel's good in Marvel or whatever. The first thing we do is we try and figure out how to do it ourselves so that we can do it to other people, right? And then in doing that, then eventually you kind of learn how to beat it as well, right? So if you're having trouble playing against Crow, play him yourself and see where his holes are. Either you've found a character which is like, maybe he replaces your main, and that's rad because Crow is awesome, but maybe he doesn't, and you just learn that, like, just with every other character in this game, that there's a lot of stuff which you can do to play against him once you see the opportunities, right? Fundamentally, fighting games are about learning how to put yourself in your opponent's head, right? Learning how to empathize with them, learning how to feel what they're feeling, and think about how that changes the decisions they're going to be making. And there's no better way to do that than to actually play the character that they're playing, right? And who knows, maybe you end up learning Crow better than they know Crow, and even if you don't want to play him, you're going to know that matchup, right? But that's exactly the kind of thing that I think people should get into and should feel like is a core part of playing fighting games, because yeah, you can post about how broken it is on the forums, and you can yell at us and ask us to nerf him or whatever, right? But that changes nothing for you immediately, right? And it also doesn't help you grow, right? If it's I think it's more powerful to learn how to deal with it yourself, right? And that doesn't mean that there aren't like balance changes that we will make for the sake of fun, right? But there's some things in this game which we want you to deal with because we think the solution is fun, right? Dealing with fireballs is one of those things, and I did another video about this, so it's on YouTube, you can go watch it, whatever. But like, fighting games, video games in general, is kind of recreational problem solving, and it wouldn't be any fun if we didn't give you a few interesting and tricky problems to solve. And sometimes you do that by inflicting the problem on other people, right? In this case, it's Crow, and seeing how they respond to it. So, thank you very much for watching the stream so far. It's been a blast. It always is. I'm going to go ahead and play some ranked games now. If anyone wants to get in a lobby, we can do that, but it's going to be pretty casual from here on out. I've finished with the talky bits. But thanks again for everyone who tuned in, and honestly, like, if you like this stuff, do me a favor and follow me on Twitch. You can just click the button that's, I think, in the lower left underneath the player or whatever. It helps me out a lot to see people follow, because I want to do this regularly. I want people to tune in regularly, right? Like, you can also check out my stuff on YouTube. I usually post the highlights of each stream up there, so that's youtube.com/pattheflip. And like, when I do this stuff, share it with people who you think could learn something and who want to learn something. Like, share it with your buddies if you play fighting games with your friends. And get them into it, because I think it's really cool to have for me to start conversations and then see kind of where they go from here. So, thanks a lot for watching. Now we're going to shift over to some games.